Hello, everyone, and happy Thursday. Welcome to this month's webinar, The Changing World of Philanthropy, the first of our Fundraising for Academic Leaders webinar series. My name is Pearl Hoagland, and I am the Senior Program Manager for the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy. I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, a couple notes. This webinar will be conversational with the opportunity to ask questions during the webinar, as well as a Q&A following the presentation. Please submit any questions you have in the questions box using your GoToWebinar control panel. In the days following the webinar, you'll receive an email with the slide deck and recording to review again at your leisure. You've got a cause, learn how to fund it. At the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy, we enhance fundraisers' skills so they can develop and sustain donor relationships to advance their cause in today's growing giving landscape through a proven contemporary curriculum. We want to recognize our important affiliate partners who provide training and education to fundraisers nationally. Check out the map to find an institute in your community. If you are on social media, please give us a shout out using the hashtag #SIPWebinar and tag us. Now, I am very pleased to introduce today's presenter, Kathy Drucker-Duff, CFRE and founder of KDD Philanthropy. KDD Philanthropy was born out of a desire to work with the professionals who build a philanthropic society. This vision was driven by Kathy's belief that philanthropy is one of the strongest forces for good in our world, and she has seen firsthand that a skillful fundraising program inspires incredible generosity. In her role as coach and consultant, Kathy helps organizations transform the way they practice philanthropy, grow talent, and approach the future growth of their organizations to inspire this generosity. As an executive at leading nonprofits in San Diego, Kathy developed deep expertise in the spectrum of advancement specialties, from alumni engagement and donor relations to principal gifts and strategic planning. Her tenures include Associate Vice Chancellor of University Development at University of California, San Diego, and Associate Vice President of University Relationships and Development at San Diego State University. Welcome, Kathy, and thanks for being here. We're just going to get Kathy unmuted.
Everyone, and thank you for being here. Apologize for that small little glitch as we get started this morning. Great to have friends, colleagues, and peers on the phone. We look forward to spending the next hour and a half chatting a little bit about philanthropy and current trends and how they impact the work that we do. Our agenda this morning, we hope to talk a little bit about those trends and how they influence or can influence the conversations that we have with our prospects, donors, and friends. We want to have a better understanding of how some of these things can help motivate our donors, and then we will link all of this conversation to the Sanford CRE approach and be able to hopefully connect some dots maybe from other webinars that you have participated with on the Sanford Institute. I like to start all discussions with a reflection, and the one I chose for today is one of the most common quotes that we see when we talk about philanthropy. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. I think this really speaks to the work that we do, the opportunities that we provide friends and those in the community, alumni, to participate with us. And a lot of our work is educating about giving and the power of philanthropy and the power of giving. So we're going to spend some time talking about some trends. I think one of the most important ones to recognize is that we have more people in the United States that give than vote. And what that says to us is that participation is important. And we may see in our local newspapers, announcements of very, very large gifts, and we're going to talk about that trend in a minute. But what is equally important is are we making sure that we are educating each and every person who could participate with us the joy of giving. And are we talking about participation so they see themselves in our story? A lot of times I'll be talking with someone and they'll say, Kathy, I can't make a gift like so-and-so did. I don't have that kind of money. We don't want people thinking that philanthropy is only for the uber rich. We want philanthropy to be for everyone, and we want everyone to see how they can make a difference. However, with that being said, we are seeing larger gifts, and they continue to grow. Gifts of $100 million or more each and every year, they continue to go up. And this is important because these are the types of gifts that make enormous impact. But the other thing I want to say about these gifts is that it is not uncommon. In fact, most of the gifts that we read about and we see when we deconstruct those gifts, they can come from alumni, but they often are coming from people who move into our communities and believe in the work that we are doing. And there was a study a couple of years ago about $100 million gifts that had come into the healthcare industry. And every single one of those in that study had a relationship with that donor less than 5 years. And so what that says to me is that we all have the opportunity to build and these relationships with folks that are interested in doing good. And I think it's ironic that today's webinar is being hosted by the Stanford Institute at National University, because they are a beneficiary of someone who has absolutely been a part of this trend, someone who did not have a relationship with National University when he made his first multi-million-dollar gift, and his relationship with National was less than 5 years old when they announced their 100 million plus gift a couple of months ago. So we have it in our own community, we're seeing it here, but I think that we can see this in every community. Who are the folks that are coming in, and how do we partner with them to talk about the work that we are doing? And we certainly are seeing more transformative gifts, and again, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then a lot of the changes that we are currently seeing in our industry are being driven by younger donors, and we will spend a little bit of time talking about that as well. The pattern of large gifts coming in by older donors, and when we say that, we mean at the age of 64 or above. We'll talk about that. Higher education is driving this. And for those of you on the phone, some of you have principal gift officers or transformative gift officers. What we are seeing is universities are making investments in a staff, a team, that their job is to look at whether transformative on your campus is 5 million or 10 million, 25 million, 50 million, 100 million, 500 million. But we are seeing dedicated staff that their job is to work with the most elite folks in the industry and be able to hopefully attract them to our institution by building a relationship and building a partnership. And then we know that we have donors both on the wealthy and the not wealthy side. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through today's discussion. So some of you may be familiar with Giving USA. It's one of my favorite things to read. It comes out every June, and it talks about trends. And many of us have felt that we are seeing a decline in donor giving and that our largest gifts are making up for that. This year was really the first year that we really saw it in the Giving USA report, and we saw a decline for the first time in individual giving. Now, I think it's important, though, to recognize that we are seeing an increase in donor advised funds, and I'm going to talk about that trend in a minute, and some of those people will fall into foundations, and certainly bequests are also individuals. So, but we are seeing some decline, and I want to talk about that as I go through these different slides. But I want to talk specifically about a handful of trends that I think are important to pay attention to. Excuse me, I went a little too fast on that. Mega donors. These tend to be the very wealthy and the very generous. They tend to look at our organizations as a vehicle to solve problems. They look at us as a vehicle for solutions, and they look at us for how do we create tangible partnerships. When I first got into fundraising over 25 years ago, it was about what the university or what the college needed. And what we are seeing is a trend with our mega donors, those that are giving these very wealthy gifts, is they are coming forward and saying, I think this is an institutional, this is a community, this is a global challenge. And I think that through a partnership, we can solve it. I'm familiar with another very large gift where the donor shopped. He spoke to 5 different organizations across the state of California, and he had an idea. And he was looking for what institution was going to help him seed that idea. And he literally ran into a faculty member. And through that discussion, it was through them dreaming and brainstorming how his philanthropy and this researcher's research, how could it get to market faster? And could this gift do that? And so it was through that, and this example is very true. We are seeing people there talking to folks. I had another client where the situation that came up was there was one person, they received a $35 million gift. I later was working with someone on the East Coast, and they said, we lost that gift. And the reason they lost the gift is when the donor said, I have an idea. I think that we need to invest in curing diabetes, and I'm going to make a gift of this amount to do that. The first organization, the second organization, the third organization that this donor and his family spoke to said, we can't make that pledge. The organization that accepted the gift said, we can't make the pledge, but we're willing to try. Let's see how a partnership between your family and this money and our research, how are we going to get there faster? And they said, we can come up with milestones. This is ways that we can do it. So they did not promise something that they couldn't deliver, but they made a promise that they would do everything they could to get as close to that cure as possible. And they're now in year 3, and they have seen an increase from that donor family. So we know that our mega donors, they come forward with ideas. They're very entrepreneurial. And what this is really important is, how are we listening when people have ideas? If it's something that maybe isn't on our agenda, are we taking the time to ask questions so that we can explore further to see if this is something that maybe this is something our institution would do? I find a lot of times that when mega donors are interviewed, they will say, we talked to 5 different institutions. I talked to 7 different deans. I talked to 8 different chancellors or presidents, and people said, oh, we can't do that here. And so they want to know that they have a partner. They want to know that they can have a conversation and that we together can dream. So I encourage you not to just, when people come forward with sometimes what seems like a crazy idea, how are we investing in those discussions? How are we learning what is important to them? And maybe how do we look for that match between what is the institution good at, what could the institution be good at, and what would a partnership like this look like? Because I think we're all committed to big solutions, and we know that there is a certain population that is in a position to help us with those problems, or with finding those solutions and being able to move them forward. The other trend that we're seeing, and this is continuing to grow, is that it is not uncommon now for major institutions to see 2, 3, or 4% of their donors are contributing 95, 96, 97, 98% of the income that's coming in. And so you can see that we're kind of at this quandary, because we have our mega donors that are able to make really amazing gifts and move things forward. And again, we can create these relationships new. They don't have to be people that we've known forever and ever. But we also want to have participation. So we're going to talk about that as we continue to go through. So the next trend I want to talk about a little bit is legacy donors. And a lot of times when we say the word legacy, we have a tendency to think of planned giving. And while planned giving certainly is a vehicle to secure legacy donors, when I use the term legacy in this case, I really am talking about folks that are starting to think about what has been meaningful for them in their life. What do they want their legacy to be? And so for those that, whether they're brand new to our organizations or they're folks that we have known for a long time, these can be faculty, these can be alumni, this can be staff, this can be friends in our community, this can be parents of students, is asking them, what would you like your legacy to be at National University? What would you like your legacy to be in our program, in our school? And ask them, because we have a whole crop of folks, my age and up, our baby boomers, that are really thinking about what is their lasting difference? How are they going to make a difference? What do they want their family to remember them for? And so we need to be very comfortable in asking the question, what is important to you? What is important to you in your giving to our organization? What could be important to you in our giving to our organization? And what do you want us to remember you for? This is a great discussion to have. It's a very conversational, and I'm finding that donors love being a part of that discussion. They want to know a lot of times, what is it that you are thinking about? Or we can talk about a past gift and talk about how we can expand on that and what a legacy would look like. We can, if they've given, maybe they haven't given to our organization yet, but we know they've given to another organization. Where is that partnership? Where is that alignment? Donors want to make a lasting difference. And so being able to ask questions that will allow us to get there is really critical. Do we, or are we in a place that we truly understand what motivates those we are working with? And if we don't know, how comfortable are we in asking? Lisa, I have loved having this conversation with you about student success. When you think about our institution, our university, our college, where would you like to have the most lasting impact? And how do you want us to remember your contributions to our program? What could we do in the future to grow that? What would a legacy for you look like? Very conversational. So we can do that and look for it. Being able to build people, bring people in is very important. We also know that in some cases, legacy means recognition, which means we're naming programs, we're putting names on building. We don't sell these things. We want to recognize people for the impact that they have had or could have. And so that's another way to bring up the legacy discussion. Social. The social donor thing continues to grow. We're about a little less than 2 weeks away from our National Giving Tuesday, and I absolutely expect that we are going to see numbers continue to go up in this area. So we know that our donors are online. We know that they are looking at our websites. They are engaging in crowdfunding. They are giving online. They are taking surveys. They love to ask their opinion and be able to answer and look at things that we're doing. But I talk about this not just because it's a trend, but I'll be honest, it's also a concern. And I'm going to use I have a daughter now who's a junior in college, but when she was a junior in high school, she was working at Baskin-Robbins making, $8 or $9 an hour. And I saw that she had made a $50 gift to a crowdfund account, because we had access to her bank account at this point. And so I asked her over the dinner table, Kaylee, first, of course, as a fundraiser, I'm very proud that my daughter has done this. But I asked her, I said, Kaylee, I noticed that you made a gift of $50. And, that's a lot of ice cream scoops. Can you tell me what motivated you to make the gift? And she told me a story about something that had happened to a teacher at school, and many of the students and parents were contributing. So that's great. That's all wonderful. A week later, I asked her, hey, Kaylee, I'm curious, do you know where your gift went and how it helped your teacher? Not only had she forgotten about the gift, but she knew nothing about it. And when I think about, we were talking just now about legacy, and we were talking about mega donors, that's all about building relationships. If someone can easily go on to your institution site or your school site or your program site and click a button, they make a gift, we instantly send out that thank you. That's great. And for programs of doing it, please make sure that you are sending those thank yous out immediately. But that's very transactional, which is the exact opposite of what we want to be doing in this space. We want to be in a position that we are educating people about relationship giving and transformative giving, not transactional giving. So how are we going to take all of the things that are happening on social media and make it that we are still building relationships? This is going to be critical, because if we don't have a mechanism other than doing the very quick thank you, we are training donors that it's okay to do a quick gift, snap a button, and move on to something else. And colleges and universities have traditionally been one of the top philanthropic endeavors in the country because we have been so committed to building those relationships. And so if we're teaching a lot of not only younger donors, but anyone who's now going online to do things, how are we going to ensure that, yes, this is a vehicle we want them to use, but we also want to make sure that we are in a position to very clearly be able to educate them about the importance of giving, what giving looks like, and why it is so important that giving is never transactional, but it is something that is a thought process that people give to. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. I will say, for those of you who are thinking about how we steward our donors, for a long time we would send a photo. Maybe you missed an event, we missed you, or send something that would inspire or bring back a memory of their time on campus, or a special professor, or someone that did something. I can walk into a classroom with my smartphone and ask a professor to very quickly, hey, can you tell me how the new technology in this classroom is impacting your teaching ability? And then I'm going to be able to have them say something, and then I'm going to get on myself and say, donor ABC, we wanted you to see firsthand the impact that you are having. So think a little bit about how you can use social media as a platform to be able to also assist you in how you are doing your work. And then the other thing that we're seeing along the crowdfunding is certainly there are a lot of institutions that are doing crowdfunding campaigns, and I think those are good, but how often are we allowing and sitting down with prospects and donors and having them help us design a campaign, or even create a campaign for the folks that they most closely are friends with, they connect with? Because fundraising is still a very much a peer-to-peer sport. When we talk in pride about somewhere that we give to, others want to know about that. People give to things that they believe are going to be successful. They do not give to something based on need. And so we have to make sure, are we really giving people the opportunity to be a part of something successful? And when we can get them engaged and when we have some ownership, that is going to drive that a little faster. So let's talk about women donors. There's all kinds of research, especially this has been like in the last 18, 24 months. It has been great to see the number of articles that are coming up and the importance of the research that is coming out. Last year, we saw that 63% of all gifts that were made on Giving Tuesday were made by women. I think this trend will continue to grow because if you look at the next stat, that 3.5% of the average wealth is coming from women, whereas men only give 1.5. And I don't mean to be stereotypical. I'm just going to talk about some trends that we're seeing. All relationships are important. We want to make sure that we're cultivating all relationships, but this is a trend that I think we need to watch, especially as more and more women are becoming entrepreneurial. They're launching their own firms. They are getting more comfortable in wealth. As you can see, 45% of American millionaires are currently women. 2/3 of all American wealth is going to be controlled by women in 2030. I have worked with several donor families that, especially if they were traditional in that sense, so we're talking about men that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and some that are now gone, that it is not uncommon that they directed what the philanthropy was in their family, and women are now saying, it's my turn. Either that they've earned that right, or unfortunately they've lost their spouse. And so we are definitely seeing that there is a greater wealth transition that is taking place and a greater decision making. And so what this really requires is, how are we thinking about women differently, and how are we treating them? And there's one stat here that we know that women are more likely to support regional or things in their own community, whereas men tend to support things that are more global. Women tend to budget. Now, if I know that women tend to budget, then that means that there's a very good chance, if I'm talking to a woman about a larger gift, that perhaps I need to talk to her about pledge payments, because she's going to want the opportunity to budget. We know that women who volunteer are more likely to make a gift. We also know that women want to be thanked differently. So if I'm thanking every single person who makes a gift to my institution the same way, I want you all to take a step back and think about, for our couples, what is the conversation you're having with the men? What are the traditional couples? What's the conversation that you're having with women? If you're stewarding two people in a household, have we asked them how each of them want to be stewarded? Because I can tell you, in my household, and I am in a traditional household with a man and a woman, that my husband gives to the things that are important to him. I give to the things that are important to me. The only place that our giving overlaps is where we have our kids in education. So very important. Just as important in same-sex households to be having the conversation, because just because there's two people in that household does not mean they want to be treated the same. And so how are you having conversations about what will motivate you? How do you make decisions? I have only had one development officer ever ask me, Kathy, how do you make fundraising decisions in your household? I guarantee you that some of the letters that come to my house would look very, very different if someone asked me that question. I encourage you to ask it, because it's important to understand how families make decisions, how couples make decisions, how individuals make decisions. Are they influenced by friends? Are they influenced by family? Are they influenced by leaders? I know we have a lot of leadership on the phone today, deans and chancellors and presidents, and a lot of times our donors are looking to you, especially when you have built a relationship and they respect and trust your leadership. They're going to say, you tell me what is most important. But we have to be able to ask questions and go through the process to really determine what is important and how are they making decisions. So let's talk a little bit about interdisciplinary donors, because this is a trend that I think we all can get behind. This allows us to get very creative. And what I mean by this is a donor that may want to give to 3 different areas of your institution. They may want to give to 2 different programs, and they expect that we're talking to each other. They want us to be talking to each other. They want us to be looking at what is it that we are doing. And so institutions, as we are building these transformative giving departments to attract the largest gifts, we also see that they are focusing in different ways to bring folks forward. Our donors see ourselves as one. So if I have a conversation with someone in English, and then 2 weeks from now I have a conversation with someone in business, and 3 weeks from now I have a conversation with someone in nursing, I expect that you are talking to each other. And so they see our institutions as one. Very important that we recognize that. And again, this is overlaps a little bit with mega donors, but they want their vision. People who are giving, when they have an idea, they want their vision to become our vision. And how do we make that happen? So when you think about what can your role be in this area of really encouraging interdisciplinary gifts, are you an instigator? Do you have an idea? Are you perhaps in engineering and you know that a partnership with health and a partnership with humanities will strengthen something? How are you instigating and bringing these ideas forward? Are you talking to donors about ways that they can help instigate and maybe even get interdisciplinary change on our campuses? Are you a facilitator, which means are you going to bring different parts of the campus together? Are you a broker? Are you an educator? Is there another role that you can play? But if we know that folks want, especially with some of these big ideas, to bring as many people as possible to play in the sandbox together, what does that look like? How do we get there? And what is your role? And so this is there's a few takeaways from the conversation today, and hopefully part of this is to think about each of these trends. Is there an opportunity to be able to discuss this trend? How does it apply to the folks? And I know we've got some folks on the phone where your programs are more sophisticated, and we have some folks on the phone today where your programs are really kind of new, and you're looking for tips on how to build your program. How can these trends support the work that you do, and what does that look like? What are the conversations that we want to be having with different folks to make sure that we're bringing things forward? So let's talk, just like I spoke specifically about some trends, and now let's talk about really what's happening with some of our donors. This one worries me, and I've seen it in a couple different ways, but that we are seeing that folks that are 64 or above are supporting twice as many causes as those that are under 64. Why this is a concern is that we are not seeing younger age groups giving at the same rate that our folks that are now over 64, what they were doing when they were 54 and 44 and 34. I think that this speaks to, we have to continue to recognize that our job is to educate about the power of philanthropy. And when we have someone who has never made a gift before, we need to have the patience and we need to have the strategy to be able to sit with them and talk about how they too can be philanthropic. And what does philanthropy mean at your institution? One of my most favorite questions is when I ask someone, from whom did you learn to be generous, or from whom did you learn to be philanthropic? And when someone looks at me and they talk about philanthropy, that tells me they're probably a more sophisticated donor. If someone is like, Kathy, Kathy, that's not me. I'm not a philanthropist. Then I get to talk about what does it mean on our institution to give? And again, getting back to that earlier trend, we talked about the importance of participation. How do you describe that in a meaningful way so that they actually want to join us and they are motivated to give in a way that is really, really important? The next thing, AFP, which is the Association of Fundraising Professionals, they put out a study this spring that kind of got my attention, and it should get all of our attention, that it shows that 45% of the people who gave to a charity last year. Now, these numbers represent all nonprofits. This is not just for higher education. Higher education tends to trend a little bit higher because we are so relationship-based, but this is still a very alarming number, that 45% of donors who give to a charity one year only are contributing to the same charity in that next year. We need to be thinking about how are we creating loyalty. Sometimes when I'm in a conversation, someone will say to me, hey, Kathy, I think our donors are tired. And I'm going to always push back on that and say, no, there is no such thing as donor fatigue. What there is we are not doing a good enough job to show our donors why their giving is important. And they get tired of us having our hand out and talking about need. And they want to know impact. People are not giving for need. In most cases that you will give to need, you'll give it once or twice, and then it's like, hey, how come you haven't figured that out? They want to give to things that are aspirational, that are, and there's a difference. You can have something where there is a need, but we talk about it in an aspirational way, and that they're going to be a problem solver, and that they are part of the solution. Very different conversation that this program will shut down if we don't have a gift. And so recognizing I can have the same issue, but I've got to do it in a way that I am problem solving and I'm looking at what are solutions. But this next bullet then is really what got my attention, is that only 26% of new donors are giving a second time to that same organization. And I want you all to think about how much work it takes to get a new donor. And so why are we not paying more attention to this and really making sure that after someone has made that first gift, that not only are we thanking them, but we are recognizing them, we are staying in touch with them, that we are demonstrating impact so they know that we care. There are too many organizations out there that are asking for money and not doing it well. And a lot of that not doing it well is that we are not recognizing thinking in ways that are meaningful to our donors. And I think we will continue to see this number go down. I also think that the trend about social media and being able to just instantly push a button, make a gift, and walk away and forget about you is also contributing to this, which is another reason why it is going to be so, so important that not only do we have social media vehicles, but we have ways to keep people engaged with us as they move forward. So this is a quote that came from the actual AFP report. There's still a lot to unpack, and we know there's still a lot to unpack. There's things, there's a lot of folks that are still worried about the economy. They're worried about how tax laws, and even though we're starting to see some of those implications, what does that mean? There are a lot of things that are coming in, but everything is suggesting that if we do not put greater attention to relationship and how we are working with our donors, we are going to see that philanthropy continues to decline. So you did see in that quote the importance of donor advised funds. I want to talk about that for a minute. If you are an institution on the line that has a DAF program, congratulations. If you are not, it's okay. You do not need to have one because there are plenty of there's community foundations, there's banks, there's lots of places where people can go to set up their donor advised fund. But what we do want, every single one of us on the phone should want to be a recipient of the funds that are coming out of these DAFs. And so I want to talk a little bit about this trend and why it is important. But if you're not familiar with what a donor advised fund is, there are lots and lots of articles. I would encourage you after the webinar to maybe Google and do a little bit of reading, because there are some indicators that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But it really is, it's a charitable savings account. It's like I'm setting up a fund where I want my charity to go. And so I've got something that's designated, and 100% of that money has to go to charity. So very, very important to be able to do that. Why do donors have a donor advised fund? Why would they do that? Someone may have a windfall. Maybe there was an inheritance that came through. Maybe they had a stock that they sold that for whatever reason they have a windfall, and they recognize that they're going to need some sort of benefit. It might be a tax deduction, or they're something they're very committed to, and this windfall allows them to do something in a new and inspired way. often they are going to someone who has a donor advised fund. They want some guidance. Which is why we're seeing some of the bigger universities across the country creating donor advised funds at their institutions, with a certain portion of that will come back to the institution. And again, there's a lot of articles about that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but they're looking for guidance. They're looking for advisor services. I already mentioned the importance of tax deductions, and they like the convenience of having one bank account or one area that they know is going to be dedicated to philanthropy. Who are the folks? Obviously, folks that have money and some wealth, but it doesn't have to be incredible wealth to be able to open this and do this. Again, a windfall can be of any size, shape, and some people will choose to keep their donor advised funds open, and some will choose to have them for a few years. But what we are seeing as a trend is a priority to give. So if we know that we have people that we're working with that talk about giving and how important giving back is, and that they have the wherewithal, this may be a vehicle that either they're looking at or considering or have. They have a desire to make an impact today, and we tend to see the gifts that they are making are larger than our industry or institutional average. They have a very high rate of volunteerism, which means that we should already know them because they're involved in our campus in one way, shape, or form. They tend to be long-term thinkers, and they have a desire to educate their families in giving decisions. And so all of these things are things that we can be looking for and thinking about how we move them. So if you think back on the last, I don't even know how many slides we've been through now, but if you think about what we've spent our first 40 minutes talking about, how can you take these trends and apply them to your work? And so I'm going to give a couple of examples, but I always like to, for those of you that have others, whether they're on this webinar today or not, are there some things that you could take away and discuss? And I would really advise you to print off the slides and have a conversation. And you don't need to be doing something if you're a smaller shop with each of these trends, but who is your staff person that is really thinking and listening and paying attention to those that are moving into the community? Who are our most loyal donors? Could we run a report that would show the 25 most loyal people to our organization? And could we go out and have a conversation with them and talk about the importance of legacy? What are we doing? What are the trends at our institution, and what are they saying about social media? What are we doing beyond that initial thank you to be able to think them? So I would encourage you, participating in the webinar is a great first step. Having a discussion back on your campus with some other stakeholders about how are we responding to some of the trends, I think is an important discussion to have. Certainly, we need to make donors a vital part of our story. How are we doing that? What does that look like at your institution? Are you sharing how philanthropy makes an impact? Are you sharing how your institution is better? Are you talking about how your institution could be better through partnership and investment? Being able to think about what is it that we're able to accomplish together is important. And again, great conversation to have around a brown bag lunch, to be able to look at that. What types of communications are you sending out? And how are you using those communications to make sure that you are messaging about philanthropy in meaningful ways? We are in a day and age where philanthropy is not something that's nice to have. It's an absolute must on our campuses. If we want to have programs that are first of, if we want to have programs that are best of, only of, we have to be able to look at how is philanthropy going to do this? How is I always say that philanthropy is the great enhancer, but we have to talk about it with great pride. And a lot of times I think we hold back, and we're going to actually have a slide coming up that's going to talk about a way that we can look at this a little bit differently that will hopefully help us do that. Number one thing, are you thanking your donors? And not just thanking them in the way that you think is important, but are we asking our donors when we have conversations with them, when we are accepting their gifts, are we asking them how do they want to be thanked? I've got the little orange tag here. Think about how retail is in our space. I had a training yesterday on a site with clients, and we were talking about, on my birthday, I am going to get a birthday card from Southwest Airlines. I'm going to get a birthday card from the Marriott. I'm going to get a birthday card from National. Those tend to be the vendors that I work with when I'm traveling. And if I can get birthday cards from all of them, why am I not getting cards and acknowledgments on special days from those that I give to? But we also need to move away from just thanking for the gift. If I'm really trying to build loyalty, do I thank you on the anniversary of your first gift? Am I sending a card to memorialize and recognize that you've now been a donor to our institution 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? How does the way that I thank you role model the behavior that we want you to continue with our institution? This is a great question to be able to sit down with our teams and really look at how are we doing. A lot of times, especially for our deans, I will say, hey, any gift of $1,000 or more, I want you to sign something. Please, my invitation to you is take that and write a special PS on the bottom. Do something in a pen. Do anything that will help something stand out, so that if I am giving to more than one organization, the PS that you wrote, I'm going to remember that. Because the other organization I gave to, I got a standard thank you. There was no handwritten. Everything was either computerized or signed by a computerized pen. Taking the time, 30 seconds per any letter that goes out of your office to make it more personal will help grow some of the numbers that we've talked about to get us to that second gift. What are the different methods for reaching out? There's lots of ways that we can do it now. Are we shaking it up? Are we making it look different? Don't just email, don't just phone call, don't just send letters, but let's make sure that we're shaking it up a little bit and we're reaching out different ways, because all of us are now responding differently. And we have certain populations that we used to say based on generation that they wanted mail. And another generation wants an email, and another generation wants a text, and another generation wants a Snapchat. I don't think that we can be that blanketed, and I think this is another thing that we have to ask people how they prefer to hear from us, but we also need to make sure that we're paying attention to different vehicles, and that I don't just think the way that is most comfortable for me, but that I am thinking in the way that our donors have told us what they want. I can't know what our donors want if I don't ask them. And this is part of, I think, one of the funnest parts of our job is being able to have a very natural conversation about what is it. So how do they prefer to be contacted? And once I have that information, am I putting it in the database? So for our academic leadership on the phone, I don't expect that you're going to put that on the database, but please, please, please share it with your development partners. Share it with, if you're a larger shop and you have research, if you have data analytics, whatever it may be, make sure that we get this information in, because there's nothing worse than someone telling us that I only want to hear from you over email, and we don't get that in the database and we continue to mail to them. And then they say, you know what, those folks can't even listen to what I like. Why would I give them money? It is very little things that will bring a donor in and keep them or send them away to somewhere else. And folks that give, if they don't like us anymore, trust me, they are giving to somewhere else. They will find a way. It's not like, oh, I don't like this place anymore and I'm just not going to give anywhere. They are giving. And it's because someone is doing a very good job in educating them and bringing them along. So asking people how they prefer to be contacted, ask them, what do you believe? What do you think of our work? Do you think that we're doing a good job in thanking you? Are we doing a good job in showing you how your gift has been utilized? What could we do better? Is there another organization that you give to that thanks you in a way that is meaningful? Would you tell me a little bit about that? The more conversational that we all can become, the better job we are going to do in raising money. There are some organizations that are doing online surveys. I love them. Don't mix a survey with a gift. And don't send out a survey if we don't have a team that's going to be able to actually read through the results and then let people know what we heard and what changes we are doing to be able to move that forward. We are now going to go. I don't see any questions yet in the chat box. Please know that there is a question box, because what I'd like to do is ask for anyone on the line. Is there someone that would be willing to chat or type into the question box? How are you addressing some of the changes that we just spoke of at your institution? And if there are folks that would be willing to share, I'm going to keep going in the presentation, but I would love to hear. And some of this is hopefully elevating the discussion to having a conversation. Some of it is, are we even talking about big ideas and what we would do if we had a gift? I know that I've worked with some clients who are like, Kathy, we're not ready to get a gift of that size. All right, well, let's talk about that then, because we want to be in a position to get a gift that would be meaningful for our campus. And again, you need to look at what is most meaningful for your campus. And there are campuses that $1 million would make all the difference in the world. How are we having those conversations? So don't get put away by some of the big numbers, and instead think about what does impact look like on your campus and your program. And if I had a gift of $250,000, how would that truly change what I'm doing? And then how do I start talking about that? how can my development partners, how can we have a conversation and start testing these ideas to get them out there in a way that is meaningful? So please take some time to whatever the trends that is most applicable to you. Again, I wouldn't say let's hit all 6 today, but let's talk about what 1 or 2 do we think that we could start to make a dent in, because I think that would be helpful. Pearl, I can't read the, oh, here, I got it. I write a note on every thank you letter that goes out that references the gift they made. Thank you. Really, really appreciate that. So important. I want you to, for all of you on the phone today, to think about the difference when you get something that is clearly a canned letter, that you know it's been computer generated. It doesn't have that personalization. What is it that we are doing? And are you going to really read that? How do your envelopes look different? That's the other thing is, think about when you come home. And this is the time of year we are in the biggest giving season of the year. From November 15th to December 31st is, for a lot of organizations, they might see 50, 60, 65% of their gifts are going to come in this 6-week window. That's not as true for higher education. So if someone's not seen that trend, don't freak out. That is certainly with our nonprofits, we tend to see a greater number that come in. But if I look at just what I came in the mail, I was on the road, so I got 5 days worth of mail when I got in last night. And just looking at those things, there was only one thing that I wanted to open, and it was something that was not in a number 10 envelope. It was in a note card size, and it was handwritten. So think about what is it that will inspire you to open mail, because we want to make sure that people are opening what it is that we have. All right, so my comment here, I work at a small nonprofit, and we don't have a system where we can track, I'm sorry, I can't read the whole question. Let me just scroll down. Where we can track.
I can read it for you, Kathy.
Thank you.
I work at a small nonprofit, and we don't have a system where we can track our donors. Is there one system that you would suggest?
Oh, that is such a loaded question. I think what's most important, because there's a lot out there. There are a lot of people are moving, their Salesforce. I like the Blackbaud products. I like Razor's Edge. I think it is very productive because it has a lot of intuitive tools. But I think you really, I can't answer that without knowing, how many records you're looking at. What is most important is, do we have a way to track appeals? Do we have a way to track how information is coming? In the old days, I used to have a Rolodex. Then I moved to an Excel spreadsheet, and then I had the benefit of having a system that the university purchased. And so being able to, if you can't track all, make sure you're tracking those that you are responsible for. And what I mean by that is sometimes we'll have someone who's doing annual giving and someone that's doing major giving. Make sure that you can at least track for your portfolio and come up with systems to do that. So great question. If I didn't answer that in the way that you were hoping, type in another one, and we'll make sure that we get there. So please think about how you can address some of these trends that we've talked about, and how they can, what ways can you utilize them to grow the conversation, grow the philanthropy, but most importantly, grow relationships with key individuals. Because our job is not to get a gift. Our job is to build relationships on behalf of the institutions that we serve, and then be able to move towards a gift. But we want someone who becomes a donor to give for the rest of their life. And so if I've got someone that's in their 50s, I've got another 30 or 40 years with them. If I have someone that's in their 20s, I can have an 80-year relationship. So I can't think just about the gift. I have to think about what that relationship is and what that looks like. So core concept, donors no longer need a fundraiser, an administrator, a president, a dean, a chancellor to make gifts, because they can go right to our webpage and see what we're doing. So we really have to be in a way that we can demonstrate value. People can read our collaterals. They can read our websites. Don't be a collateral. Make sure that you are the collateral, that you don't hide behind it, but that I am a walking collateral for the institution that I serve. We are no longer gatekeepers. And what I mean by that is that we're customer service agents. And so it used to be that to make a gift to an institution, you had to work with someone. That's just not the case anymore. So that's what I mean by saying that we are no longer gatekeepers, because it used to be that before a gift would come in, either a campus leader or a nonprofit leader or a fundraiser would have a discussion with folks, but now people can just go online and decide what they want to do. And so we really want to get in the business of this customer service to be able to move folks forward in ways that are meaningful. So when I look, and I get to work with nonprofits, I work with a lot of different types of organizations, healthcare and higher education. We know that the best philanthropic programs are those that have strategic priorities, that they partner with donors' values and interests. The donor community is going to continue to become more sophisticated, which requires that we're more transparent. And for some of us on the phone, that is difficult because they want to look at budgets, they want to see layouts, they want to tour the buildings, and they want hard hat every other day to see what's going on. Really important that we are able to talk about that transparency because they are going to continue to demand that, and that is part of the partnership. And so we have to recognize that when we accept these gifts, that is absolutely part of the partnership. And are we able to do that? And then one of the things I think is really important is to recognize that transactional giving, in my mind, is something that I don't really think about. Going back to social media, I click, I hit a button, I decide an amount, I move on. That is charity, that is transactional. Our job is to build relationships so that we are building philanthropic partnerships that are long-term. And in my mind, this is just my definition. Please don't be offended if it's different than yours. But charity is something that folks are not thinking as much about. I want to be in the business of building philanthropic partnerships because I want someone to think before they write that check. I want someone to think before they make a pledge. I want it to be something where they're stretching, that they are absolutely looking for greater ways to partner, and we are the conduit to do that through that customer service or through that relationship building. So donors do not give to organizations anymore. They are giving through them. They see that an organization is doing something that they value, that is important to them. They believe in our mission, and they are choosing to give that gift through the organization to make sure that they have impact. So we know that higher level gifts are being shopped around, very important, and it does involve less donor loyalty, which means I need to be in a place to build that. Confidence is key. That they believe in our organization, they believe in our plans, and that they believe the right leaders. And so please, for our leaders that are on the call today, recognize that you make such a difference. Development officers are paid to ask for money, and people know that. It is rare, though, that deans and chancellors are paid to ask for money. Now, it is becoming an increasingly greater part of your role, but they look to you to share what is your leadership, what is the impact that you're going to have, and when you are involved in the discussion, those gifts go up. Now, I would encourage for our leaders on the phone, please recognize that it should, granted, I'm saying this as a development officer, but the strongest partnership that we can have is one where development works together with leadership, because the development officer's job is really to talk about strategy and make sure that strategy moves forward. And we think about philanthropy 24/7, and we can be the eyes and ears for you. The webinar that we're going to do in February will talk a lot more about the partnership and how you can really build that to increase your giving, but important thing to do. And then we know donors want change. They want to be part of that change, and when they are, they want to know how they were a part of it. They want to know what impact is. We know that they care more about milestones. It is very common that if someone makes a large gift, they're going to say to you, organization ABC, I'm going to make this gift contingent that after the first year this has happened, and then I'll make your second payment. And after the second year this has happened, and I'll make your third payment. Really important, and that shows the increased sophistication. It also shows that there's a lot of organizations out there that just have not done a good enough job in accepting gifts, and so they don't have as much trust in us, and we have to show them that we are trustworthy, that we will use the gift for the intent that we have agreed upon and that we have signed for. And so recognizing that is important too. Fundraising will continue to evolve, but what is most important through this evolution is to recognize it is still relationship based. It is very engagement focused, which means those that are most likely to give to us have some level of engagement, whether they're volunteering, whether they are an alum, whether they speak in our classes, whether they are involved in our organizations, whatever it might be. We absolutely know that engagement is critical because those who volunteer tend to make larger gifts. People who are giving are mission-centered, they are belief-driven, and they are donor-engaged. This is a great test to be able to look and see how are we doing in the space. do I think that we are sharing our mission in a way that is meaningful? Are we talking about their beliefs and how they partner to our beliefs? And how are we doing in engaging those donors in meaningful ways? Pearl, I see another question that's come up. Will you go ahead and share that with me?
Yes, absolutely. We actually have a few that have come up, but this
Perfect.
one is, I'm having a hard time getting my team to see the value of building relationships. And yes, it requires time, but the end result is loyalty. Do you have any advice I can apply?
Yes. So the first thing I think is to talk about the term transactional and what does it mean to be transactional, and then what does it mean to have a relationship. And I ask people when I want to have that discussion, I want them to define what would be a meaningful donor relationship for them. I think because a lot of our organizations have metrics, and I am a huge believer in metrics. I applaud metrics. I think they're uber important for accountability, but I don't want metrics to be everything. And a lot of times our metrics are how many face-to-face visits, how many moves, how many solicitations. All those are important to make sure that we are focused on the most important work that we're doing. But I want to have a conversation. So a lot of times if we're talking about an individual donor and we're talking about the strategy for the next gift or the first gift, I often like to ask, where do we want to be with this person in 50 years? If we were successful in them making a gift, what do we want this relationship to look like in 5 years? For those of you who are in campaigns, what do we want to look like at the end of the campaign? What do we want to look like for our next campaign? What do we want? How are they going to make the difference? When we change the way that we ask questions, I think a lot of times that will help move it. But I would say between the partnership of how do you all want to be treated, and then look at how do we build that, and what does a gift and a strategy really look like for a lifelong relationship? Those would be two ways. If I didn't cover that enough, ask more for what you're looking for, and I'm happy to share. Pearl, why don't we go ahead and go to the next one?
All right. So this next question is from someone who is a retired division president of a Fortune 500 company. They started a foundation 3 years ago that is focused on entrepreneurial big idea. That it categorizes the entrepreneurial big idea based on the slides that you presented. The question essentially is, how do they tap into the major donors that are interested in improving a major problem in America?
Yeah, terrific question. And the first thing is, for those who are involved in the organization so far, who are your influencers? Who do they know? One of the things I love to do is sit down and do what we call a peer screening, which is going to bring, sometimes I do it with one person, sometimes I do it with 2 or 3. But if you already have stakeholders, and it may be from your former life, in this case, based on the retirement from where you came from, there may be folks that you know of. But otherwise, it's the first is, who are the influencers, and are there folks that I can talk to that might be able to make introductions? Number 2 is, are we doing any type of event? And I want to be very clear when I talk about an event, I'm not talking about a large gala, and I know some of you on the phone do them. I'm not saying they're bad. I see those as brand building. When I talk about philanthropic events, it might be that you, the new CEO, that you're going to invite 5 people in the community, and you're just going to invite them to a breakfast, and it's going to be an open discussion about what is it that your foundation, your organization is seeking to solve, and share a little bit about that story and why it's important, and then ask them questions. What do they think of your work? Is this something that they would ever be involved in? Do they know people that care about the work that you're doing? I will tell you, there is no magic bullet. We build a donor, one donor at a time. I have not figured out how to get 100 at once. Yes, we can do, we do mail appeals and we bring them in, but each and every relationship, each and every donor that we engage, it is one at a time. But once I have one, I can go to 2, I've just doubled, then I go to 3, then I go to 4. And I've been in a place where I've been in startup, brand new programs, and it was getting out, it was talking to people, it was asking them their opinion about what it was we were doing, it was asking for referrals, following up on those referrals, following up on the people that gave us the names, and just being meticulous in that rigor and discipline to build. Now, you can also read, you can look at like organizations, and look at their donor boards and look at their donor publications and who is giving to those organizations. A lot of times, if I am giving to one, let's say that perhaps I'm giving to a food bank and I really care about food sustainability, I can look across in the community I live in San Diego, and there's probably 50 different organizations that fill somewhere in that space. And so being able to look at others, I'm not trying to quote unquote poach. A lot of times if someone cares about something, they will care about that at more than one organization if we show the work that we are doing is impactful and is making a difference. We need to find folks who are like-minded, who really care about the issue that we are trying to solve, and then ask them to help us find others, because we do know that donors like to give to things that are successful. They want to know that if they are the first person in the door making that gift, that there's people coming behind them. And so a lot of times people are happy to be an influencer for you. Thank you. Pearl, do we have one more?
Yes, we do. This is from someone whose nonprofit is currently, they have a fiscal sponsor, but in the process of becoming their own 501c3. They do a lot of community outreach, have developed and are continuously improving their website, community partnerships, and trying to establish donors. Their question is, what is the best way to reach community members or organizations without necessarily always asking for money?
Yep. So I like to do things that are going to be educational. A lot of our community leaders are committed to the community as a whole, and they like to know what is new. They like to know what is innovative. They like to know what is foundational. And it's not uncommon to the same, if I mentioned the breakfast for the 2 questions ago, but let's say that I am looking at a list of community leaders, and there might be 20 people that I think would have an interest. Again, inviting them to perhaps come to, if you have something to show. So I have a client that I'm working with, it happens to be food sustainability, and they're able to do farm tours. And being able to bring people out to the farm and be able to show how sustainability is working live and in real time, and then have a discussion about their work in the community, and is there anyone that would like to know more, they will then individually follow up with, let's say I had 20 people at a tour, there may only be 2 or 3 or 4 that raise their hand or say, hey, I have an interest in learning more. That's what I mean where we build one donor at a time. But what are the different, that we call it a hook, what are the different hooks that you have that are exciting, unique, that are innovative, that will make you stand out, that you can share? In some cases, I have a really charismatic CEO, and I know I've been talking about universities, so let me kind of make sure I'm being inclusive to our group today. For nonprofits, if you have a CEO that is really charismatic, think about where you can get them to speak. A lot of times I'll say, are we speaking at Lions Club? Are we speaking at Rotary? Are we speaking in a way to start building our brand, especially in your case, if you're going to be a new 501(c)(3), is where should we be in the community? Where are the community leaders? You know, in the San Diego community, I can tell you who the top Rotary is. I can tell you where you want to be. And for different women's clubs, I mean, it's being able to look and see who are those that are really making an impact, who are the influencers, and how are those decisions being made, and being able to do some of that is important. So I'm going to keep going in the interest of time, and Pearl, if there are additional questions, we will get to them at the question phase, if that's all right. I do want to tie all of this because I'm hoping that a lot of folks on the phone are familiar with the Sanford way, or the cause selling, because I think it's interesting that the philanthropist that is making this call today possible spent so much of his career really looking at what is cause selling and how do you bring people in. And so I'm going to just cover this very quickly, because his philosophy in building client relationships is so similar to what we're going to talk about in just a minute. But phase 1 is prospecting, or the pre-approach. We prospect, we identify. Phase 2 is then looking at what is your approach going to be? What does our clients need? How do we discover that need? How do we build upon it? How do we share? How do we make a match? How do we handle objections? All of that is what we call cultivation. And then as Denny is very artfully laid out, is then we have the ask, which is where we're all moving to. I mean, that's the whole relationship is to build towards the ask, and we steward. So I want to share that, because then as this next phase of our presentation or discussion today is going to look at the donor cycle, and I'm going to try to look at it in a slightly different way. But I want to start with a reflection. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. This is so true for our donors. How do they feel about the experience they are having with our organizations? institutions, nonprofits, etc. How are they feeling? It is so important that we are thinking about the work that we do in a greater way of not just the ask, but how are we thinking and recognizing? The traditional donor cycle has stewardship at the end. And I put stewardship right at the beginning, because if I am thinking about what I want this donor's experience to be with our organization, I am going to move them through the donor cycle in a much more meaningful way. And that is critical, because that means I'm listening, I am paying better attention, I am having a much better discussion with them. So we're going to talk about the donor cycle in a minute, but you'll see we have identification and qualification that goes very similarly to phase one, to what we just saw in the cause cycle. When we move into cultivation, then we move to solicitation and stewardship. All of these are critical, but I would encourage you to think about how are we creating experience for folks at the beginning of the process. So I'm going to share a slide, because a lot of times we talk about the words I just saw or said in that slide: identification, qualification, cultivation, solicitation, stewardship. And I think when we think about it in a different way, it will change it. So could we think about our job is to identify, which means we are looking to find people that would care about our organization, care about our mission, care about what we're doing, and then we want to introduce them. And so this dovetails beautifully into the three questions that were just asked. How are we introducing people to the wonderful work that we are doing? And then we want to create interest. They have to have an interest in what we are doing. People can have all the capacity in the world, but if they don't have an interest in what it is that we are doing, what it is that we are solving, what it is that we are hoping to accomplish, we're not going to get them there. And so that importance of being able to identify, introduce, and interest is critical, and then I need to involve you. So we talked about that people that volunteer, and especially women that volunteer, are more likely to make a gift and a larger gift. How am I doing a meaningful job in involving you in our organization? What does that look like? And then I want to invite you to partner. And a lot of times I work with people and they'll say, Kathy, I don't know how you ask people for money. How do you do that? And what I say is I don't ask people for money. I invite them to join me, join the organization that I work with, to join the leader that I'm partnering with. We invite them to join us on a journey. And what I found is when we think about the work that we do as an invitation, instead of an ask, for most of us, it becomes so much more comfortable. And so I'd like each of you to think about, if you were just to frame that one piece differently, and to think about, would you invite people to become a part of the great work that your organization is doing? Is that more comfortable? And if so, how do you shift out the word ask and shift in the word invite? Because what we're looking to do is we want to invite people to invest in the wonderful work we're doing. So the 6 I's: we identify, we introduce, we interest, we invite them, we involve them through invitation, but then we invite them to invest. When we can look at it this way, I think that fundraising becomes so much easier. And I'm not going to say what we do is easy. I think it's very hard. But I think that there is a way that when we have rigor and when we have discipline in the work that we do, I am much more likely to get there. And so an invitation, I love the word. It's just it's a great word, versus ask is not quite as warm. So again, how can we shift to get more comfortable? And so this is a slide, especially if you're newer in fundraising, please print it out, put it next to your computer, and be thinking about, what am I doing to identify, introduce, interest, involve, invite, and invest? When we can do that, we are building passion, because when you put the core concept of passion with the 6 I's, we can do this. All of us can do this. People gravitate towards passion. People gravitate towards excitement. People love to know that they're going to be a part of something that's bigger than them. And so I know a lot of times we want to go out and we want to talk at our donors, and we want to throw a lot of stats at them, and we want to show facts, and we want to let them see how many people are going to be impacted. There are some donors that gravitate towards that, but almost everyone gravitates towards passion. I don't need a lot of those stats. A lot of our donors don't need the stats, but what they do need to see is your incredible passion for the work that you are doing, that your organization is doing, and how they can be a part of it. So we have 6 different ways. I don't know why we've got so many 6s today, but we have 6 different types of gifts I want to talk about. Annual gifts are current use. Annual gifts are something that folks are going to give hopefully every year. And we have to make sure that we ask them every year. Annual gifts tend to be participation gifts. They tend to be the gifts that I'm not thinking as much about because it's an easier check. But I do want to get to a place where I want to be that annual fund priority. How do I ensure? And so I'll ask someone, how can we make our institution a greater giving priority to you? What could we do to entice you to want to make an annual gift that will have an immediate impact? Major gifts tend to be episodic. And so, yes, there are some donors that will make a major gift year after year. The other thing that's important is major gift is our term. If I write you a check for $1,000, and that is the biggest check I've ever written or ever will write, that was pretty major to me. It doesn't matter that your institution, you call a major gift $10,000. So please make sure that you're recognizing where I am, and I may not be in a position to write a check for $1,000 every year. So if it's episodic, then that to me is major. Let's make sure we're paying attention to that. But major gifts tend to have a greater impact for the institution. Principal gifts is a term that we've been hearing for the last 15, 20 years, which is a gift that is maybe once or twice or 3 times in a lifetime. So this is going to be a much larger gift. We talked today about mega gifts. Those tend to be the transformational. This is a gift that will completely transform. So I've talked a little bit about the Sanford Institute at National University. The gift that Denny made was a transformational gift because they did not have a philanthropy institute. This was something that became a first of and an only of in our community, but also became a best of through enhancements and other things. And so a transformative gift is something that is going to completely transform an organization. And it may be that an organization will only get 1 or 2 of these in a lifetime. And for some of our larger institutions that are hiring staff that are really focused on transformative gifts, you may see many more of them. But this is something that is special, and we shouldn't expect it, that it's always going to be there. Planned gift is going to be a gift that is coming out of my estate. It's an appreciated asset. It is something that is sometimes I'll give an asset and the asset comes back, but it usually comes through, again, as a bequest, as an asset, an appreciated asset, stocks, a transfer of some sort of wealth. And then blended. And blended is a very important tool to recognize that my goal is I want every donor in my organization to make an annual gift, and then I want to work with them that episodically they're going to make a major gift, that maybe once in their lifetime they're going to do a principal or transformative gift, but they are going to do something in their estate or through an appreciated asset, and that I may use these different vehicles to help them get to what it is they hope to accomplish. So I want to spend a few minutes in each stage of the donor cycle and what this means. When we think about identification, that is identifying people who could have an interest in our business, who could be philanthropic and support us. And so where do these names come from? They sometimes come, if we're a larger shop, I've got a prospect research team that will help generate them. But we saw from the questions earlier that both of those examples were smaller shops, which means that you are going to do some mining of the newspaper. When I was trying to build a hospitality school, I was the fundraiser, so I wasn't building the school. We had wonderful academicians that were building the school. But I was the fundraiser that was helping build the resources for that. I spent a lot of time looking in my own community who were the hospitality leaders. It didn't matter if they'd gone to my institution or not, if they were alumni or not, but were they leaders, and would they potentially care that we were now going to be educating a workforce in this area? I looked for vendors that were working with our institution that were in that hospitality sphere. I looked for events that people were attending. I looked at titles. I looked at all kinds of things, anything and everything that I thought that would help build a program where I had no alumni and we had no gifts, to being able to rebuild it to a named school. And it was through a huge partnership with the president and everyone else, but we did a lot in the identification. So how do each of you on the line, whether you're an academician, you're a leader, you're a fundraiser, what are you doing to grow traffic? What are you doing to grow names? What are you doing to grow portfolio so that we are in a position to do that? When we look at qualification is about, do I believe this person has the capacity, and does this person have the interest or inclination in the work that we are doing? I live in a community where we have a few families that are very, very well known, or philanthropists, and I'll hear those names. Hey, Kathy, how do we get Mr. and Mrs., or how do we get this family, or how do we get this individual to give? Well, first of all, you're going to need to have a connection because they're already choosing who they give to. So who is going to be that introduction? So you can have lots of people in your community that have capacity. Our job in qualifying someone is hopefully in that first discussion, can we determine that they have the propensity to want to give, that they have an interest in the work that we're doing, or could they? And what could I do? What are the questions that I would ask? How do I showcase our work? Whether I'm speaking at a Rotary meeting, whether I am inviting 6 community leaders to a breakfast and for them to hear about what we're doing and who could they introduce us to? And is there someone in that group that would have the capacity and has the propensity and the interest to give? At that point, then what I want to be able to do is move them into a conversation or series of conversations that we call cultivation. And in cultivation, our goal is to make a match. I've already qualified you, which means I know you've got capacity and I know that you are interested in the work that we do. How do I now make a match? How do I get you excited? What is it? And it may not be me. It may be a faculty member. It may be a volunteer. It may be a program leader. It may be a president, a CEO, a dean, whatever it may look like. What are we doing to make that match? Which means I'm going to test some different ideas and see what it is that you like. What are the things that we are doing that you would want to make a gift to? Once we have done the cultivation and I've done some testing and we've gotten to a point where I'm very comfortable with where we're going in this discussion, I then am going to be looking and asking you to make a gift. The most important thing about asking when we do make a gift, ask it is not a range. A hard ask is about a number. It has to be a justifiable number. It has to be a defendable number. I didn't just make this up. I have to be, if someone says, well, why do you need $100,000, Kathy, to do this if I only want to give 50? I have to have a pretty good reason of why this ask was 100,000. Hopefully it matches to how I've qualified them and cultivated them. And then the thought of stewardship. And again, I like stewardship at the beginning of the cycle is what does thoughtful engagement look like once someone has made a gift, but how am I going to continue to build that relationship and that commitment to the organization? Again, if we saw that last year that only 26% of people that made a gift are going to make a second gift, that means I lost 74% of the people that we've talked to. That means that I'm not thinking about the donor commitment. I'm not doing a good job in talking about impact, and I'm going to need to do a much better job in this space to be able to get there. So what does a donor need to have? And this is what we're testing for as we go through that qualification process and then move into cultivation. Do they have a linkage to your cause? Could they? Okay, so for some of our folks that have newer nonprofits or smaller nonprofits that we're building or coming out of the gate to do something new, they may not have a linkage today, but could they have a linkage tomorrow? And what does linkage look like? For our more mature programs, we're able to look at trends and we're able to see, okay, generationally, most of our donors look like this, or regionally, they look like this, or most of our donors tend to trend towards, we have 5 initiatives, but they trend towards this one. Why is that? And so we have trends. But so I'm always looking, could we have a linkage? What would that linkage look like? And how am I going to build it? Because then they have to have interest, inclination, and propensity. So again, this is not about having money in the bank. This is about that they have an interest and a belief in the work that you are doing. Or we're asking the question, could they? Could they have a work? And then the ability and capacity. And I've talked about that a lot, so I won't continue, but they absolutely have to be in a position. One of my favorite phrases that I say is hope is not a strategy. I can meet someone, they can have all the money in the world, but I can't hope that they're going to do something. I have to connect that linkage. I have to build that interest, that inclination, and that propensity, or we're not going to get there. Or you could see someone that maybe is younger in their career and you think, 5 years time from now, they're going to be in a great position. Okay, let's keep them warm, but don't hope they're going to do something. Don't constantly take them out to lunch. They're not doing something for 5 years. Let's be honest, and the people you should be spending your time with are those that are going to be able to do something today. So how do we raise money? How do we raise money together? First and foremost, every single person on this phone call, you have to give to your organization. You don't have to give to the area that you ask for, but you absolutely must give to your organization. And I'm going to ask that you stretch a little bit, that you don't do that charity gift that was easy to write a check. I want you to stretch, because if you stretch, when you have a conversation with others, you are able to role model behavior, and you're able to talk about why you stretched to make a gift that will inspire others. Very important. You cannot go out and ask people to join you in a cause if you have not made a gift yourself. And again, I'm going to encourage you to stretch. How do you talk about your institution affiliation? We talked earlier about the importance of passion. Use a lot of pride, a lot of pride. Make sure that you are talking about the work we do in very positive ways. Demonstrate your pride. If you're a first of and only of, make sure you talk about that. If we're rising and philanthropy is going to allow us to rise, talk about that. Make sure that we are demonstrating the impact in each and every conversation. When I talk about role modeling, I love to take a donor story and then share their donor story. I'll ask them first, may I tell your story and how you became a donor to our, organization ABC? Want to be able to do that, talk about that, and be able to then say, may I share your story? So if I'm out with someone else, I'd say, you know what, Tim, I'm loving this conversation. And I recently had a conversation with someone named Peggy, who is now a donor to our organization. And I tell you a little bit about Peggy's journey with us, because I'm going to role model the behavior I want. And so being able to do that is a very powerful way in raising money. We have to invite for people to learn more tours, conversations. Would you like to learn more? Will you join us on this day? We're going to have a small group of people who are coming together to learn more about our wonderful mission, to learn about our organization, to learn about what it is that we are doing. Salon events I already mentioned. A salon event is when we bring small groups, hopefully like-minded people. Sometimes it can be purely, I've done salon events where someone who wants to support our program is going to invite everyone in their neighborhood, and they have a fabulous house and people want to see that house. And I'm okay that I understand that people are coming to see the house, because I'm convinced once they get in the house, we're going to talk about a program that is pretty spectacular. And I'm not going to convert every single person in that room, but even if they choose not to give to us, hopefully they're going to go out and tell someone else, you know what, I was over at so-and-so's house the other night and I heard what's going on down at the aquarium. I am really impressed. Or I heard what's going over, what's being talked about. Do you know Habitat's doing this? Did you know that College A, B, and C is doing this? And so we can get champions that will create buzz for us, even if they don't make a gift. How are we signing? And I love that someone used the example that they're signing. Make sure that we're utilizing volunteers, that we're utilizing leadership to sign invitations, emails, letters, whatever it might be. That mixes it up. And when we see that we have leaders, whether that be a paid leader or a volunteer leader that is actively involved in our organization, is a very compelling thing. I did mention peer screening, and that's where you bring small groups together. Really important with peer screenings, the information that we share is confidential. So I never send peer screening out over email. I will give information when we sit down, and then I will ask for it back. I love doing peer screenings with 3 to 5 people. I think you can get some synergies. But the other thing is I can have a list of 100 names. I don't want a donor or a prospect or a volunteer to feel bad that they only know 3 people. But if I've got 3 or 5 people and they all know 3 to 5, I can walk out of a meeting with another 9, 12, 15, 25 names. So that is powerful. And how are we bringing volunteers in together is critical. Really being able to look at that. And so, everything that we've talked about today is to really hopefully give some motivation about that, whether you've been doing this a day or you've been doing this your entire career, there are ways to take the different trends and apply them in ways that will change the work that you are doing. How do we take that change and make it meaningful? How do we move it forward? Fundraising is a team sport. There is no gift ever that should have one person that works on it. A gift truly should be, and I like to say that I like to have 3 people involved in any relationship, because that anchors in. We know that we have turnover in all of our positions, but certainly I know that the turnover tends to be at a more rapid rate for our fundraisers. And so if we have more than one relationship, we talk about, I think the question was earlier, how do we build these relationships? One is making sure that folks that are critical stakeholders or could be critical stakeholders for us don't just have a relationship with a person. If I own that relationship and I leave the institution, that relationship leaves. And the work that we do is not about me. The work that we do is about our institution. I have the wonderful ability and opportunity to build relationships on behalf of the institution that I work for, but those are not my prospects. They are not mine. The only reason I get to work with them is because I work for the institution. And so really important to recognize that when we are able to bring more people into the discussion, again, my preferred number is 3, because I think that's a really nice anchor. And a lot of times if I'm looking at an institution of higher education, I might look at a faculty member and a leader, whether that be my dean or my chancellor or my provost or my vice president. It may be then a champion. So who is this going to impact? It may be a faculty member from the lab. It may be a program director. It may be a student. And then there's the development officer, because our job is to make sure that we are the conductor and that we are moving donor strategy forward in a way that is meaningful and important. So that would be 3 for our nonprofits. It might be your CEO or someone else on the leadership team. It might be a critical volunteer or program champion. And again, your development person. The development person should always be the consistent in that relationship, to make sure that we are putting things in our databases, to make sure that we are being consistent in how we move them forward. So Pearl, I've got a couple minutes before I think there's still one question that I haven't seen, maybe even more. Do you want to throw that at me?
Kathy, you've actually answered all the questions that have come in, but just a note that it's a very impressive presentation from someone. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. That is so nice. Well, so now I'm going to turn it over to Pearl. She's going to talk about additional ways that you could be involved. Certainly want to see you in part 2 of this series, where we're going to spend a lot more time talking about Project Champions and what that means. But I want to thank National. I want to thank the Sanford Institute and everyone for being on the line today. We're going into Thanksgiving, which is one of the greatest times of gratitude. Think about, who can you call? Who can you share your gratitude for their involvement with your institution, and thank them.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And if anyone does have any questions and you add them into the questions box, if we have time, we'll try to get to them. But I will, as Kathy said, I'll keep on going. Kathy, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for your great questions. Getting to the next slide here. There we go. So if you want to contact Kathy, you can see her contact information on the screen. And just a reminder that you will get the slide deck and the recording in an email. So you will get her contact information in your email at a later date. So as Kathy mentioned, our second edition cause selling textbook is out. It's on Amazon. If you want to learn about our cause selling cycle, how to prospect, cultivate donors, and then make the ask in a successful way, please check out Amazon and get our textbook. And again, as Kathy mentioned, this is one of a series of 2 webinars. By registering for this first webinar, you are automatically registered for the second. So mark your calendars. You will get a notification through GoToWebinar just as a reminder, but we definitely look forward to having you all back on February 4th. Kathy, as we start to wrap up, if there's one takeaway or maybe a few takeaways you can think of the folks who are on this webinar, what would you share?
I think the most important is that recognize we all bring a very different style to the work that we do, but we grow that style when we talk with each other about our strategies. And so the different trends that we shared today, I would love and I would encourage each institution, have a conversation about how these trends impact your work and what you might do different in 2020 based on some of these trends and how they can grow your work.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Before Kathy's webinar, or her next webinar, we do have another webinar coming up in December around crisis communications called When It Hits the Fan, Everyone's Role in Crisis Communications. A great webinar to help you prepare for any upcoming crises that might come your way and have your organization prepared for any of those communications you might need to have. So register, you'll get the email slide deck and you can register through the email. Thank you so much to everyone for your time and participation. To help us continue to improve our monthly webinar series and ensure that we are providing value to our audience, we invite you to please take a few minutes to complete our survey. In closing, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for all that you do to better the communities in which we live, work, and play. And we'll see you on December 18th and February